Hello, everybody. Welcome into the NBA Front Office Show. Lot going on in the world of the NBA. I know I start every show saying that, but really, there is so much going on today that before we started the show, Keith and I were debating whether or not we could fit all of this into one episode. We are going to give it a shot. There is so much happening around the league right now, including this little thing called the NBA Finals, but also a lot of news and notes regarding free agency, trades, the draft, all kinds of stuff we're going to be getting into. I'm Trevor Lane. You can find me on Twitter at Trevor_Lane, over on Instagram at Trevor Lane NBA. Keith Smith is with me at Keith Smith NBA. Before we dive into anything else, though, really quick, Game 3, the Front Office Show cast is back. We are going to be live during Game 3 of Celtics versus Warriors. That's coming up Wednesday night. I'm going to put the link in the description. You can come watch our stream of the game, and we're going to be talking basketball directly with you. It's a lot of fun, so come join us for Game 3 of the NBA Finals. I had to get that in there because I knew I was going to forget if I didn't. Oh, boy, it's going to be a lot of fun. Keith, how are you doing, man? How are you holding up, particularly after Game 2?
I'm good, man. They did their job. They got 1 out of 2 in the Bay Area. I think it's I've been saying this all day, and it's funny. I've had a lot of people come back with like, I guess I didn't really think about it that way. If it was flipped and the Celtics had gotten destroyed in Game 1, like they did in Game 2, but then came back and won Game 2, and we're going home, wouldn't the storyline be, Boston figured some stuff out. They've got all the momentum now going home. It just went the other way. And it's I guess these playoffs, more so with this particular version of the Celtics, have taught me don't get too high, don't get too low. Because when they look really good, they tend to follow it up with kind of a stinker. When they look really when they lose, they look like, how did this team even make the playoffs? They tend to look really bad. And then they come back with, generally one of their best efforts. So I don't know. I don't feel like I know anything more about how this series is going to go, other than I think it's going to be close and it's going to be a long series all the way through. So I'm not, going one way or the other as far as freaking out or, celebrating. I just feel like, hey, they went out, they took home court advantage away, and now they get to hold it back in Boston.
Yeah, I mean, we're very just in general, we're reactionary in the sports world. It's what happens. What is the most recent thing that occurred? We have that recency bias that certainly comes into effect here. But I mean, they did what they were supposed to do. In Game 1, you saw the Warriors make their third quarter push, and then the Celtics responded. In Game 2, the Warriors made their third quarter push and made sure it was just such an insane run that there was no real way to respond. And the Celtics, of course, they had their own shortcomings in that quarter. And then, the game was pretty much over from there. But like we said after Game 1, this doesn't mean the series is over. Same thing here after Game 2. This doesn't mean the series is over. There is a long way to go. We saw a number of blowouts in the playoffs this year, only to have teams bounce back from them. So I think we've got a ways to go. I put out there on Twitter, I think that what we're going to see happen with this series, I think we see Boston split 1-1, and then whoever wins Game 5 wins the whole thing. That's my guess as to what and that's not some crazy hot take, because a lot of series wind up like that, where Game 5 is really the pivotal game. But that's kind of the way I see this going, is that this is going to be pretty close from here on out, even if each game individually may not be all that close. I think the series itself will stay pretty close in terms of the record. It's 1-1 right now. I think we're going to leave Boston 2-2, and then we've got a best of 3 series, and then off we go.
Yeah, neither one of these teams is at all concerned about playing on the road. Now, we are going to see, a Celtics crowd that's going to be absolutely, roaring Wednesday. It's like they're going to be, kind of out of their minds, ready for that game. I think when I picked Celtics in 6, you kind of start, what's the path to get there? And the path I mapped out in my own head was win one of these first 2, then win the 2 at home, then you lose Game 5, the Warriors stay alive, and then you win Game 6 back in Boston and celebrate in front of the home fans. Do I expect that's how it's going to go? No, not necessarily. That's a path I think that could come up. But yeah, it wouldn't surprise me at all. Yeah, if we're in Game 5 and we're in one of these situations where it's like all right, the ball's in the air to decide it at the end of the game. That's how close to this series is, because I think these teams are pretty good. I know we saw the Celtics kind of really run away with it by the end of game one.
Mm-hmm.
Warriors ran away with it in the second half in game two, and it was just one of those things where it was like, all right. And I think both coaches are pretty smart too to say, yeah, forget it. Like, I'm waving the white flag here. This is not worth it to continue to push guys, as much as we are. So, yeah, interesting though. The Warriors definitely made some changes. They changed some defensive coverages and matchups and all that. But promise we're not ducking it. This is just not what we do here. Is super in depth breakdowns on games and all that stuff. Well, we're gonna hit it off the top, and then we're gonna get into a bunch of news topics. I gotta hit you with one thing though.
Yeah.
That I don't know why this hit me, but I was watching the Darvin Ham press conference tonight, and I thought if we ever, for any reason, had to change the name of the show, we need to change it to Green Eggs and Ham. That would be pretty
okay, because the green, because the Celtics and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Dr. Seuss's estate may have something to say about that, but I do like it.
He's from Massachusetts. It's okay. So
yeah, there you go.
Celtics guy deep down. Yeah. That occurred to me while I was watching. Those are the kind of things I think about when I'm watching press conferences.
I got to tell you a little aside here that you just made me think of, and this is, again, we're already going off the rails here, but
one topic in
the other day. So my daughter is all into the planets right now, and she's been getting into the different order of the planets and all that kind of stuff, the different planets and everything, and we were talking about the origins of like the planet Jupiter and where the name comes from and stuff. And I was going into mythology and all that. And I jumped into Zeus, and I said, and she's 5. And I said, have you ever heard of Zeus before? And she said, well, yeah, Dr. Zeus.
That's awesome.
And I said, that's close, but no, that's not it.
Did you see that planet they discovered that rains lava at night?
No.
Did you see that? Yeah, it was all over Twitter the other day. It's some long-range telescope discovered this exoplanet that rains lava at nighttime, which is just wild. I don't even, all right. Enough, tune in to our other show, Space Talk with
Can the Avengers go there? Because that would be awesome.
Maybe they should. So a bunch of people were like, so it's Mustafar, right? With Obi-Wan being back in the consciousness now, right now with that show. So yeah, but all right, get us back on track. Let's
are you good? Are you good with Warriors Celtics?
I mean, yeah, I don't have a ton to add unless we wanted to get super deep into it, and I think we've got too many news items to talk about to spend a ton of time on that.
Okay, let's get to the news then. Get to the news. Big news, of course. Quin Snyder resigns from the Utah Jazz officially. I mean, it's felt like this has been coming for a while now. There's been uncertainty, but now officially he is leaving the Utah Jazz. I said what's probably going to happen is he's going to take a year off, and then he's going to pop up for Greg Popovich. That was unintentional.
That's where we've both been for months.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
He's he'll land there when eventually Greg Popovich leaves. But what are your thoughts on him deciding to walk away from? It's not often. I mean, there's only so many head coaching jobs in the NBA for somebody to say when a team is trying to extend them and give them more money for somebody to say no, thank you. So what's your take on this situation?
Yeah, I think it's these coaches are being very realistic. Of course, I'm going to compare it back to the Brad Stevens situation a little bit, where when Danny Ainge made it clear he was going to move on after the season, which we've subsequently found out he had let some people know kind of in the early springtime that he was done when the Celtics season was over. I think what we are seeing is, well, let me finish that thought. In that case, Stevens, they had said, like, no matter who we hire, like, it's a condition, like, you stay on as coach. And then Steven said, well, what do we think about this? And kind of talked about, maybe I should move into the front office. And I think what the coaches realize is you have to be super special, like Greg Popovich or something like that, Eric Spoelstra in Miami, to stay as long as you want to stay. And I think they realize, like, unless you're consistently kind of getting over the mountaintop and you've built up that gravitas, 8 years is a long time for
Yeah.
people to hear one voice and to hear one, person kind of leading you day in and day out. I think, people forget in the organization every day from late September when training camp opens. And if you're fortunate enough to play into, late April, May, June, that's the one guy you're hearing constantly. And that can be really tough, on players and the like. So I think it's I think Quin Snyder read it of, man, we might be headed in a different direction here. If we slip any more this next year, I may not be the candidate that I once was. So yeah, maybe it is time to step away. It's also too, he's had hip surgery, so who knows where he's at physically. He may be ready to just take a little bit of downtime. But I'm with you. I think takes that downtime, and then let's see what happens with Pop in San Antonio. Maybe he's the one who slides in and takes over for him there.
Yeah. Yep, agreed. And we'll see who the Utah Jazz turn to as their new head coach. There's already a list of names. Of course, Terry Stotts popped up. Some of the names that have popped up on previous head coaching searches and things like that. But now the Utah Jazz have got. Well, I mean, let's talk about this real quick. So,
Sure.
From an organizational perspective, this is the front office show after all. Teams don't want to be rushed in their head coaching search. That's what we hear pretty frequently. And of course they shouldn't, because this is somebody who ideally is going to be in that job for 3, 4, maybe 8 years. You don't know.
Yeah.
You want to get this right. But we are just weeks away from the draft. It's usually ideal to have your head coach have a say in your draft process, and then free agency as well, which again, you want your head coach to have a voice in that situation. So organizationally, what do the Utah Jazz do here? Do you try to fast track things? Do you not worry about having the coach's input in those situations? From that front office perspective, how should they approach this?
Yeah, Danny Ainge was actually asked about that today in the press conference of, I forget, I apologize because I don't remember who asked it. And I don't remember exactly the way it was phrased, but it was essentially like, how quickly are you going to hire a coach? And he said a lot of what you said is like, it's not a decision you rush. You need to be, true to the process. But he also owned like, we got an off season to map out and plan, and we wanted to get moving. And he did say, I've got a few candidates in mind. Then he very quickly added, none of whom I know. So it was with that. So let's take the Brad Stevens stuff out of the mix. He's not leaving the Celtics to go coach the Jazz. Also, I know you made a joke about it on Twitter, but I saw people for real suggesting Quin Snyder's not going to go be Darvin Ham's lead assistant. That's not a thing that happens. Just because Jason Kidd kind of did it with Frank Vogel and a couple other guys that were former coaches have taken jobs. Those guys were not the high profile coaches that do that. There were guys who needed to kind of, all right, I got to rebuild a little bit here to get myself in a spot here to get back up. So let's just, or there was a pre-existing relationship like Mike D'Antoni doing it for Steve Nash.
Sure.
That was hey, I'll come and help you along in your first year as a coach. So, but all that aside, yeah, I mean, my guess is one of the people mentioned is Johnny Bryant. Clearly, they have a familiarity with him. He's a Jazz assistant. Terry Stotts' body of work is well known out there. But we're hearing a whole bunch of other names be thrown out there. Will Hardy, who's one of the Celtics assistants, has been mentioned. He's a guy who's been kind of the like tertiary candidate on these lists of, he never really seems to get to the final round, but he's somebody whose name's mentioned a lot in this. I'm missing some of the other guys for the sake of time here, but it is my guess is week and a half, they'll have this wrapped up, especially since it looks like the Hornets, who have the only other opening, are coming down to decision time there as well.
Well, let's stay with the Jazz. We'll talk about the Hornets in a little bit, but yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see how this process all plays out. Like you said, it probably should be a little bit sooner rather than later because of the big decisions that are coming up in the draft and in free agency. But again, Utah, they've got some choices to make out there. And on the Quin Snyder thing, yeah, look, if you look at what Jason Kidd did, that was kind of a prove it type situation, right? I liken it to like Juju Smith-Schuster, who landed with the Kansas City Chiefs on a 1-year deal. Juju Smith-Schuster is a bigger name than that, but he was kind of been knocked down a little bit, dealt with some injuries last season, wasn't quite his old self and everything. So now he needs to go somewhere and boost his value back up again before he can really get that big contract. You're kind of doing that as a head coach like Jason Kidd. went to be the lead assistant for Frank Vogel to raise his stock once again so he could become a head coach. That's not the case of Quin Snyder. If Quin Snyder wants a job, there's jobs out there for him. He just has to say yes.
Yeah, I mean, if Quin Snyder said, let it be known, hey, Hornets, I know you're down to your final 2 here, but I'm interested. Guess what? It'd be a final 3 real quick involved there. So yeah, this is not a thing here. I did see a couple people say, I think it's just people who want to be unhappy, but man, the Lakers just should have stayed patient a couple more days. They're fine. We're going to talk about Darvin Ham in a couple minutes here, but it's I don't. I don't know that Quin Snyder was the direction for the Lakers necessarily. I don't know that the Lakers were the best direction for Quin Snyder either. I think, I think all around, they everybody's kind of, done well here, and Quin Snyder will reemerge as a coach as soon as he wants to be a coach again.
All right, let's jump to what this means for Donovan Mitchell. There was a report from Woj that he is unnerved. Donovan Mitchell is by this, which how are you on? Like, this has been out there for what, like a month at least?
If you and I have been talking about it for a month, then either Donovan Mitchell was off the grid entirely for the last month, or like, come on, you're really, caught off guard here.
Yeah. Like how is this that can't be real. But then that goes to, okay, read between the lines. Yes. Why is this being put out there? Is this Donovan Mitchell and his camp making it known that maybe he's not the happiest of campers there in Utah? And then you can kind of see why something, because he can't really be that shocked that this happened.
No, Donovan Mitchell's not an idiot. I'd be very surprised if I think this is Donovan Mitchell letting it be known of, hey, when you're gonna talk about the next head coaches, maybe just a phone call. Sure. Let's make sure I'm okay. With the thought process here on that one. So yeah, it's I don't want anybody to get too crazy on this front that he was really caught off guard. Yeah, but I did think the wording there was funny, and that was very much okay. All right. Why is this being said now? Okay, here we go.
Well, and the word is too that the Jazz have pretty much said no to any teams that have called about Donovan Mitchell in a trade, and that if they were to
Tony Jones of The Athletic.
Right. And he also said that it would take a monstrous offer to get Donovan Mitchell. So they're not looking at moving him unless something, crazy happens, which should always be the stance for every player, right? Like, no, we won't trade that guy unless somebody does something stupid and offers.
I can think of a couple it shouldn't be a
I mean, maybe, but I mean, for the most part, I agree. Just about
every good player, yes. That should be your default, should be, no, you need to blow us away. No, we're not going to have a conversation with you. You come with your, come with your first, best, last, and we'll discuss all at once.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And that's going to come into play later with a little story that we've got on the Sacramento Kings and their draft pick. We'll get to that in just a moment, though. Rudy Gobert, appears to be very much on the market, very much available. A few teams that are after him already, the Toronto Raptors being one of them. This is a big contract for a guy that some people still say can get played off the floor come playoff time, is limited offensively, isn't a creator, but is an incredible defender. So I don't know how wide the market is going to be for Gobert. I know teams want him, but from a roster building standpoint, can you make a championship caliber team with Rudy Gobert making over $40 million per season?
Yeah, Dan, I'm glad you phrased it that way versus can you build a championship contender with Rudy Gobert? Because it's not, because clearly you can.
Yeah.
If you can't make a really good team with a guy who is every single year a top 3 defensive player, then you have no business being around the game of basketball. Mm-hmm. This guy is really, really good. It's the salary that becomes tricky because what you're essentially paying him to be is a one-dimensional, dominant defender, which we don't often see that being what teams pay for in the NBA. And to be clear to where I think you were going a little bit is he has 4 years, $169.6 million left on his contract. So that's a big chunk of change.
He's 30, as I recall.
He is. Let's see. I've got it pulled up here. I think he's at least 30, right? He turns 30 at the end of this month.
Right. So he's heading into his age 30 season. So, that's a factor, too, when we're looking at this contract. he's going to be on the wrong side of 30 here for the bulk of what's left.
And I don't worry quite as much about that as I used to, right? Because we see guys are lasting deeper and deeper into their careers with the way they take care of themselves and all those kind of things. But the reality is, more importantly, is Rudy Gobert is what he is. There's no, well, what if he develops a 3-point shot? Like, that's not happening at this point in his career, right? Where that's not happening. Could he be, more heavily utilized offensively? 100%. I still continue to be baffled by the fact that this guy can eat up Team USA as an offensive weapon every year in all these competitions. And then in, the NBA, it's like, there's Rudy Gobert's 7 points per game or whatever it is. Like, that doesn't make sense to me. And it hasn't for a long time. But anyway, going back to this, one of the rumors that's out there from Kevin O'Connor at the Ringer is the Chicago Bulls.
Yeah.
That makes me wonder if the Bulls are looking at it a little bit of, hey, we're going to pay Levine and we're going to have DeRozan. We need somebody who can clean up the messes behind them, as we go. And I wonder if they're looking at it as, we want to go where we want to go. We got to get through Joel Embiid. We got to get through some of these other teams that can score the ball, whether it be Boston or Brooklyn or Milwaukee and Giannis. We got to have somebody back there that can kind of protect the rim for us. So I do wonder if that's one of the things where we're kind of seeing out of this is that where they're going to go with with a trade. And obviously it would cost them Vucevic, but I'm guessing they're kind of down on Vuce. And then if you're the Jazz, why would you be interested? Well, Vuce is a nice replacement for Gobert for a year, and then he's off the books, and you could kind of really reset things then with basically Donovan Mitchell and not much else on your books, and you could do a major reset of your roster if that's the way it went.
Which probably appeals to some degree to Danny Ainge. I mean, the bulk of this team, this whole team really was not put in place by him. So he's got, this would give him a lot of flexibility moving forward. What's that deal though? Vucevic and what?
I don't know. Let's play. Let's look. I don't know.
Is Patrick Williams unreasonable to include there?
Yeah, I would not do that from the Bulls side.
Yeah.
Vooch and Kobe White, though, I would do, especially if I'm keeping Levine, because then you've already got Ball, Caruso, Levine, DeRozan, Ayo Dosunmu. Yeah, do Vooch and Kobe White and see where it goes, right? Just may make that the basis of your proposal there with that.
Right. Maybe something gets worked out and we do see Rudy Gobert in another location starting next year.
My guess is we don't, though. I think they bring him and Mitchell back, new coach, try one more go. Maybe they make moves with the pieces around him. Bojan Bogdanovic, also mentioned to be heavily sought after in trades, which makes sense. Go look at Bojan Bogdanovic's stats. They're pretty good as an offensive player. And he's never been as bad of a defender as people make him out to be. He's always kind of held his own a little bit more than people think. So, my guess is it's one more run. Let's see. New coach, can that guy unlock these two as a duo and, push things forward. But yeah, that definitely, it feels a little weird. The Jazz have felt kind of like they picked up that Spurs mantle of team stability of like, what they're going to be and they're fine. And now there's all this turmoil around them, and that's, but it comes for everybody eventually.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, every team hits their breaking point. And we talked about it a bunch this last season, that this was probably it for this iteration of the Jazz. If they didn't get it done this year, there were going to be major changes coming. And that's where we're at now.
Yep, absolutely.
Speaking of bigs that are on their way out, Deandre Ayton looks like his time with the Phoenix Suns is most likely going to come to the end here. John Hollinger said he's expecting him to be moved on, or at least more likely than not that he'll get sent elsewhere. Now, he is a restricted free agent, or will be a restricted free agent, and so that means we're probably talking a sign and trade here. But if the Suns really aren't willing to pay him a max salary, and that's essentially what we've heard, and maybe there was some personality issues there as well, as we saw with Monty Williams in the playoffs, other teams will pay him that max. And so that tends to suggest that, some other team is going to step up and say, we'll pay you. His agent is going to push to be moved to that team, and then we're going to be hearing about trade talks. What can the Suns realistically get for Ayton if it's a sign and trade scenario? Our team's going to be willing to give up, because if you're a team bringing him in, you've got to be willing to trigger a hard cap, give up stuff, and pay Ayton a max contract. Those are a lot of a box to check there. So what are your thoughts on a potential return?
And that makes it finding a trade hard.
Yeah.
I am very reluctant to criticize our, media brethren for some of the things that they do with fake trades, but you got to take them with a major grain of salt because there are some shows I listen to, and I listen to all of them, where it's like, that's illegal. That's illegal. I was in the car the other day. It was one of the last
can't
days
do
of
that.
school. Yeah, it was one of the last days of school pickup where I was literally screaming at the radio, going, "That's not allowed. Like that would never happen." So
Meanwhile, the teachers that are out there doing pickup duty are looking around like going,
no, I wasn't there yet. I wasn't there yet. Yeah,
Should we
would be
release
like,
a child to this man?
Funny, I'll tell a quick funny aside. One day one of the ladies came, and some depends on who's out there for the teachers and the staff. Sometimes they'll come and open the doors for the kids to get them in the car. Mostly because our daughter's older and perfectly capable of opening the door herself. They don't do that, but this one teacher came, and I was actually doing a radio appearance. And my daughter knows if she hears me talking to just be quiet. And this teacher opened the door, and she's like, "What? What was that? Huh? What? Well, what are you saying?"
No.
And I was, and my daughter finally goes, "He's on the radio." Shh. So it was kind of funny, but yeah. Anyway, back to DeAndre Ayton. There's also base year compensation, which makes a big mess of this too, because he's gonna get, assuming he gets something near the max, he's gonna get a big enough raise that it's gonna trigger the base year compensation, which then makes him count essentially for only half of what his salary will be outgoing in a trade. So it's very, very complicated unless you rope in a team that has cap space as kind of a facilitator in a deal, or you're Detroit potentially. I think Detroit's one of the teams that maybe would like to have him just directly. And if you've got cap space, then the base year compensation stuff kind of goes out the window because you're not really trying to match salary. You're going to use your cap space to bring in the player. And being hard capped also doesn't really matter. That's the Pacers are in that same boat as well. And we do know they had at least some interest. I continue to believe that this will be a sign and trade because the Suns, they're too good to lose Ayton for nothing. Yeah. They need to get something back to help them along the way. If they could link up with the Pacers and do something where they got Miles Turner back, because there's no reason for the Pacers to keep Turner and Ayton. What do we do? Why are you rebuilding the Turner-Sabonis pairing? That already proved it didn't work. Then, man, that's go. Like, let's make something happen there and really figure that out. There, a couple people have thrown at me, what about Jeremy Grant from the Pistons? Yeah, maybe-ish. I mean, that gives you Grant, Crowder, Bridges. You've got kind of all the big switchy wings. Problem is, none of those guys can really play small ball five, and then you get a little bit messy of playing them all to get there in enough minutes. But, that's something you just kind of say, hey, Monty Williams, figure that out, as you go with that. But, yeah, I do believe he'll be somewhere else next year. I don't think he's going to be back in Phoenix. They're just not going to lose him for nothing because that's a I don't like to talk about players this way, but that is complete mismanagement of an asset if you do that.
100% agree. All right, let's jump over to the Hornets. Michael Jordan is now getting involved in the head coaching process, which tells you that it's coming to a conclusion. That's usually the stage in which ownership gets involved. So when you're at the end, Michael Jordan's going to meet with Mike D'Antoni and Kenny Atkinson. We've heard Kenny Atkinson is in the lead, but again, D'Antoni, his offense would be a lot of fun with the Hornets as well. So, I mean, I think you've got two good candidates here for very different reasons.
Yep.
And it'll be interesting to see ultimately which way Jordan goes, particularly since we've heard Atkinson is in the lead. If D'Antoni suddenly gets the job, that tells you Jordan probably shifted the trajectory of this hiring process. So something to keep an eye on there. But like I said, I think there's pros and cons to either of them, and you can make an argument why either of these guys would be the best fit for the Hornets.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think these are two good coaches. We talked about this a couple shows ago, really went into what each guy could do. Does it ever still feel weird to you to talk about Michael Jordan, the owner, versus like just like it's almost like he's two different people, right? Like there's Michael Jordan, the player, and then there's Michael Jordan, the owner, like icon. Like, I don't know. Just sometimes that seems weird to me. Like, really, this is I don't know. I guess I'm just living in the past, and I still think of him as the player.
No, I do the same thing. It's weird to think of him in that role, But here we are.
Oh my gosh. I got to say this. This has got nothing to do with any of this.
Oh.
Somebody tweeted out the other day, Tyler Ford Jr.'s, TJ Ford Jr.'s, highlights from like a AAU game or something. And I'm like, no, we're not. Like, TJ Ford can't have kids old enough to be like coming up into like
he was in the league not that long ago.
Yeah, like
right?
this is not a thing.
How long
I mean, it's probably been a little while, but like, yeah, I can't.
I have to find this out.
Yeah, I can't do that. Like, I can't. That stuff makes like I feel old pretty regularly, almost every morning when I wake up and my back hurts. But like, no TJ Ford like kid like coming up and pushing in closer to the NBA. Like, no.
TJ Ford is 39 and hasn't played in the NBA in 10 years.
Yeah, he was done early because he had that neck.
Possible?
neck issue, like ended his career early, unfortunately. But yeah, just that's I don't know. I mean, no more NBA players that like I clearly remember like being drafted, like
that's what
like
it
Shaq's kid. Like they're talking about how Shaquille O'Neal's son's going to be in the draft this year. Like I don't know. No more of that. Like please, for the love of God. Like,
old enough as it is.
Yeah.
All right.
Down a little bit here.
Speaking of former players here, Rasheed Wallace to the Lakers.
Maybe not.
Kind of.
Yeah.
Sort of. Yes, and then maybe no because of context.
Yeah, so let's be clear. Let's get into what happened a little bit here. There's a story that broke out of Memphis. One of the Memphis reporter had interviewed Penny Hardaway, who's the coach at Memphis.
And Rasheed Wallace was an assistant coach.
Where Wallace was an assistant coach. And then, to be clear, this is University of Memphis.
Mm-hmm.
And Penny Hardaway basically said in that interview, Rasheed's on his way to LA to join Darvin Ham's staff. And then that got picked up and reported, and then very, very quickly refuted as being a done deal. But my guess is it's just a matter of getting there, getting things signed and agreed to, and we'll have Sheed back in our lives on an NBA bench. I'm very curious to see what that looks like, because this is a guy who was not very well known for controlling his temper.
No,
he is the direct reason we have technical foul suspensions. Let no one tell you it was anybody different. It was 100% Rasheed Wallace, because he had like 40 something one year where he absolutely went berserk on everybody.
I just want there to be like I keep thinking Staples Center, crypto.com arena. In the arena, they need to set up something where every time there is a questionable call and the player misses the free throw on the opposing team, we need the soundbite of Rasheed Wallace saying "ball don't lie." If he winds up there, it's a must, right?
I mean, every time you see it right on Twitter, there's a like questionable call, then you immediately see a million "ball don't lie."
Yep.
Replies on Twitter. Yeah, no, they absolutely should do that. That'd be pretty funny, because that's pretty that's pretty like next level trolling. Like we're seeing teams are leaning more heavily into stuff like that on a pretty regular basis. So yeah, can I say something too? And maybe I'm going to be insulting here. What in the world is San Francisco chowder? I've never even heard of this nonsense.
San Francisco chowder?
Yeah, there's this whole thing going on where the Warriors are playing the Celtics of what's the better chowder, San Francisco chowder or Boston clam chowder or New England clam chowder, as it's more commonly known. I've heard of Manhattan clam chowder, which is absolutely disgusting and gross. But San Francisco chowder, what are we talking about? This isn't a thing. Like, there's New England clam chowder, and that's it. Sorry, that's I had to let my Boston come out fully at some point, and it came out with the chowder talk.
I was going to say, you're not saying it right. I'm not a fan of chowder, so I don't know. I didn't realize this was a thing. This was a rivalry or anything like that. But
you know how the mayors of the cities do the bets.
Yep.
Apparently that was the bet. Like, it's, we'll send you a bunch of our chowder before you send us a bunch of yours. And, and I was like, nobody who wants this, whatever this San Francisco nonsense is, no one's going to eat that garbage. So, yeah. And I love clam chowder, but I'll only eat it at home. I won't eat it anywhere else. That's just a quirk of mine. I love it. But
Like, are you talking about in your house?
No,
You're
like
only
at home in New
in,
England.
in Boston.
Yeah, when I say
Okay.
home, it's almost always going to be I'm talking about home in the West.
Okay, I'm like thinking you make a really good type of
I
chowder or
actually can
something, and
make pretty good clam chowder. The problem is getting the right kind of clams and all that. But yeah, check out our third podcast, Food Talk, chowder based episode
chowder
with,
talk.
with Trevor and Keith. Trevor and
Um,
Keith talking chowder.
yeah, I would be so much help there as the non-chowder fan here. What were your thoughts on Darvin Ham's presser?
Yeah, I thought he hit all the right notes, right? I mean, those things only ever raise my eyes if it's like, oh, that didn't sound good. Um, I mean, the Russell Westbrook stuff was a little, I guess, noteworthy-ish of, nothing he said was wrong. Russ is an all-time great player in the league. But yeah, I thought he did a pretty good job. I thought he seemed very confident without
Mm-hmm.
being over the top. It wasn't a lot of rah-rah, like, let's go stuff. I thought he did a good job. You have to be very cautious with teams like the Celtics, the Lakers, a handful of other teams. You kind of have to pay homage to the history in the
Yeah.
right way, because otherwise people get turned off. But if you go too far with it, it's a little like, for everybody else who's not a fan of that franchise, it's a little like, all right, come on. I thought he did a really good job walking that line of, with that. So yeah, I thought he hit everything well. Nothing left me from that introductory press conference coming away saying, oh, that's a little concerning. Which that happens about 1 out of every 10 times, and then you kind of, it generally doesn't work out so well. But more often than not, guys do well in those situations.
Well, and you have to remember too, like the Russell Westbrook comments. Russ was like 30 feet away, like he's there, but like he's staring right at him as he's being asked, is Russ even going to be on this team this year?
Imagine if he was like, nah, he sucks, dude.
Yeah, right. I mean,
he can't play anymore. Yeah. And then I could imagine like Russ being like, you want to play one-on-one right now? Let's go. Like that would have been pretty funny. But yeah, I mean, that's sometimes you ask. It's this is when you feel a little bit bad for the reporters, because you sit there and all these. We've both been in this situation where it's like, damn it, nobody else has asked this.
Yeah.
It has to be asked. Like, and you're probably only getting one question in those types of situations. And it's like, all right, well, if they don't ask, like, I gotta ask. And the one it always got me is like, we played this game, like Celtics-based reporters. This is when everybody was on Zoom. Of like it was almost like everybody would hold out on asking for injury updates, because it was like, you're going to waste your one opportunity asking about injury updates when it needs to be asked, but nobody wants to be the one to ask it. So sometimes it'd be like the last or next to last question and be like, all right, fine, I'll do it. I'll use my question on that. I'll get my real thing for a story later in another way. But yeah, somebody had to ask, like, what about Russ? And and they did, and I thought he handled it well.
Yeah, I thought he did as well, making it sound more and more like Russell Westbrook will be back with the Lakers. But again, like we've been saying, you can't come out and say, oh, no, well, my system, it doesn't really work with Russ, so we really need to trade him. No, I mean, Rob Pelinka would probably just, I don't know, he would fall into some sort of biblical anecdote or something like that to try to explain away whatever Darvin Ham had said, because you can't do that. You can't put yourself in that situation, leverage wise or anything else. But it sounds like he is planning to have him next season, so we'll see.
And the thing is too, if you are finding a situation where it is like, there's nothing out there that's not going to be very damaging for us to do a deal, we've got to bring him back. Then you know what? You at least give it another shot and try to make it work. And maybe Darvin Ham does have a plan where you can make it work in a slightly different way. I'm going to ask you, what is the general feel for Lakers fans about this now that it is like fully official and done? Like, what is the general consensus from Lakers fans on this hire?
On Darvin Ham, they like it. Yeah, Lakers fans in general like it. He was by far the favorite of the three that were out there, and I think part of that is the mystery, right? Because you kind of know what Kenny Atkinson is, you know what Terry Stotts is, but Darvin Ham was by far the favorite, and they're excited right now about what he can potentially bring to the team. So I think it's a good thing he's got fan support right now for sure.
I thought too. I did think one thing that was notable was I felt like he went maybe a little out of his way to pump up Anthony Davis a little bit a couple times. Like he involved Anthony Davis in a couple answers to things that weren't really Anthony Davis centric questions, and I thought that was good to hear as well. And I get it. Anthony Davis was awful last year, but it's not. I have to see a whole nother half a season at least of that level of play to believe that's what Anthony Davis is now. Like I just think he had a bad year. I think he had a bad year in a year where everything went sideways for the Lakers. And, I continue to believe, there's no reason why Anthony Davis is all of a sudden this. Like I think, he's probably going to get back on track in a big way next season. So, good to, kind of see that come out of the presser as well.
Yeah. Ham is going to rely on him a lot, especially on the defensive end of the floor.
Yeah.
All right. The Blazers, just to move forward here, the Blazers are interested in Miles Bridges and John Collins. So the Blazers, I think, are going to get connected to just about everybody out there. We've already heard Jeremy Grant potentially landing with them. It's well known, they're going to try to take the stuff they got at the trade deadline, and they're going to try to turn that into a contending team this season around Damian Lillard. That means they're going to have to go out there and land some talent. I think they're an interesting team in the Zach LaVine situation as a landing spot because there's so much duplication there between Damian Lillard, Zach LaVine, Anthony Simons. Feels like you're kind of getting back into the CJ McCollum thing. There's some differences, of course, but but we look at a Miles Bridges, particularly a John Collins, who can be the four for you there. Some interesting options out there. I don't know that they're going to be able to actually land either of these guys, but just kind of keep in mind the Blazers are expected to be one of the more active teams out there on the market this year, and they will be buying, not selling.
Yeah, all sorts of flexibility for Portland too, because they can play this a couple different ways. They can either be a cap space team that operates with a ton of cap space, which means basically you're clearing the books of everybody except for Simons. Or they can stay over the cap. They can keep their trade exception. They could even get involved in some sign and trades. Bridges would probably have to involve being a cap space team and then giving him a full max offer sheet. And I'm still not fully sold that would get him. The Hornets may need to match that thing. That kind of money gets a little nervous for me with Miles Bridges, especially for the Hornets side where you've got Gordon Hayward on the books already, and you've got an extension already looming for LaMelo Ball here in a couple seasons. But I do think he really did blossom into a great player this year. And I mean, I continue. I know he had a down season, but I love John Collins, and I think any team that could go get him, that would be an absolute home run if you could get him. I think though, I wonder if we're getting into the territory where you got to blow the Hawks away to get him.
Might be.
I think the Hawks they're going to do some moves Travis Slink as much as said so, like we stood pat and we shouldn't have. But I think we'll see, some changes for sure coming out of that one. But yeah, I Portland's going to be a really fun team to watch this summer because there's just so many different ways they can go.
Absolutely. Bobby Portis. Let's talk about him a little bit.
Yeah.
Looks like he's probably staying with the Bucks. Makes sense. He was the starter for much of the season with Brook Lopez dealing with injuries. Fits well there. The fans love him there. He's produced. I wonder what the price tag is going to be, but sounds like he is wanting to stick with Milwaukee. It's a good fit for him, a good fit for the team. This is the kind of thing that makes sense as long as you can agree on a number.
Yeah, so let's talk about that because this is a fun little salary cap process here for Bobby Portis. He signed a 1-year deal 2 seasons ago, or a 2-year deal with a player option via, I believe he got the biannual exception from the Bucks a couple of seasons ago. Then he opted out. Then they re-signed him with the very, very minuscule raise that they could give him, but to another 2-year deal with a player option, because then what happens is he opts out again. Now they have early bird rights. You don't need full bird rights for a guy like Bobby Portis because he's not going to make anywhere near max money. He's not a $20 million a year player. You just got to be able to get into the range if you need to. If you're Milwaukee, give him 10, 12 million a year, and then you feel pretty good about it. And I think for the Bucks, after they lost PJ Tucker, and that loomed huge in that Celtics series that they didn't have PJ Tucker. They're not going to let Portis slip away. They're going to get that deal done and get him signed there. And I'm guessing somewhere in that 10, 11, $12 million annual value range is what he'll get.
Yeah, that makes sense, and I think that is going to get done. Jumping over to the Cavs, Colin Sexton wants starter money, starting guard money. This is the one that we talked about the other day, where we said there's an overlap right about at 18 million between what the Cavs want to pay and what Sexton wants. It seems like at some point they're close enough to where they're going to meet in the middle. But just interesting to note that he does want to get that starter money.
Yep, and again, we're hearing Pistons and Pacers as the two teams that may chase them. Pacers don't make any sense to me. I like. You've already got Halliburton, Burton, and Brogdon. Halliburton, Brogdon, and Hield. I don't know that maybe Brogdon's on his way out, but do you really just then replace that with Sexton coming in? Like that doesn't, I know that one doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Pistons make sense to me. He's already used to playing off the ball. He can defend ones. Put in with Cade Cunningham, and you're basically setting your backcourt for years to come there. But I gotta believe the Cavs are not just going to let them bounce. Unless it gets really silly, well north of $20 million a year, I gotta imagine that they're just gonna, they'll pony up and keep him because he's going to be an important player for that team, for sure. Whether it's next to Darius Garland or behind Darius Garland, sometimes with Darius Garland, whatever it is. I'd like to see Cleveland keep Colin Sexton.
Well, I think something that's important to keep in mind too is when we hear these rumors and it's these 3 teams or these 4 teams are interested in whatever, it's Pacers, Blazers, Magic, Mavs are interested in player X or whatever. That doesn't mean that the Pacers, the Mavs, the Magic, that all these teams called somebody and said, "Oh yeah, we're interested in that guy." You're hearing that from one person that these teams have all checked. It's not like teams are registering their interest in the player with that news outlet. So what you're sometimes hearing is the agent for that player. And from that perspective, it makes sense to say, oh yeah, all the teams with cap space. And then it's the Pacers. It's the,
exactly.
They all are interested in him, even if it means, there was a 10-second phone call. Hey, are you guys interested? Yeah, sure. Let's talk in a few days. Okay, cool. See ya. Oh, that team's interested. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Enough of us, myself included, put cap space projections out on enough of a regular basis that I think a lot of this stuff becomes almost slightly informed speculation of like, okay, they have the cap space. They could go get this guy and then off we go. Yeah.
Yep. So just something to keep in mind around this time of year when the rumors are flying. Speaking of which, Jalen Brunson wants a better contract or equal to or better contract than the one Fred VanVleet got. So now we're comparing contracts here. Do you think Jalen Brunson is right to want that contract? Do you think that is about his market value? What is that, about 4 years, 80 plus?
85. Yeah.
85. Okay.
Pretty on it. I didn't freeze. I'm thinking. He's nowhere near the defender Fred VanVleet is. Fred VanVleet is one of the best guard defenders in the entire league. Even though he's small, he's very much like his kind of mentor, Kyle Lowry, in the sense of he's very strong. So he can hold his own against anybody. I think VanVleet is a better playmaker for others than Brunson as well. My fear. Well, let me finish that train of thought. You get to Brunson with the idea of it is factor in more a couple years in later since VanVleet signed. Yeah, maybe he's worth a little bit more money. And it's all relative to the market, right? As long as there's even just one team, that's all that matters. But I don't know. I'm worried with Brunson that this is going to get to a point where it's like now the contract looks awful because it's instead of being 20 million a year, it's now 25 million a year, and that starts to become kind of a messy fit and those kind of things. So I like Jalen Brunson. I'm worried we're starting to get to a realm where I'm not gonna like the value what he signs or resigns for.
I think you can see that particularly since he's not very big, so he's undersized, makes some tough shots. But if he loses a little bit, just a little bit, you could see a big decrease in his overall effectiveness. So particularly with his finishing around the basket, his ability to hit some really tough floaters. Now, I'm not saying that's going to happen, but I'm just saying it's a little bit higher of a risk than some other guys who are able to contribute in a lot of other areas. We talk about this. It's kind of like, not the same, but kind of like the effect that we see on the super high percentage 3-point shooters like a Duncan Robinson, players like that, where a lot of their value comes from their ability to be ridiculously good from behind the arc, where if that one thing slips a little bit, their overall value takes a massive, massive hit. Jalen Brunson could be kind of in that category, and that's where you've got to be a little bit concerned. But, Mark Cuban has already said they can pay more than anybody else, and sounds like they will do so. But yeah, I mean, you don't want to say this is going to end up in being a bad contract. You hope that he gets the contract and he continues to flourish, and everybody says, oh, this is a great deal. I just think it's maybe a little bit more risky than some of the other deals that we'll see out there.
Yeah, you have to be very, very confident if you're another team and what your projection for him is in your system without Luka Doncic. Well,
Yes.
what does that become, for you? Because he's going to have to carry a bigger load than maybe he did in Dallas. And I'm also not entirely sold he is we throw around a pure point guard, true point guard. We threw around that term, I think, almost too often now. There's kind of like Chris Paul is like the last kind of guy like that and who's left in the league. You have to be able to score at that position now to play. But I think it is like there's still some semblance of that, and I do worry like how much is his creation ability for other players versus creation ability for himself, and that's two very different things. And it's a great skill to have it for yourself. I just don't know that I'm paying a sub 6'5" guard $25 million a year to create a bunch of really tough looks for himself.
What do you think about the Knicks bringing in his dad?
I don't know. I mean, maybe that's something I think people went a little too far with it. Yeah. This isn't like when a college hires a parent or hires the high school coach to be an assistant coach. Like it's not necessarily that situation, but I do think, maybe. But also Rick Brunson, I believe, he either played or worked for Tibbs in the past. So this is not, and it's not like his dad isn't already a coach. So that's also another like thing to factor in. But I mean, maybe it was a hope, and it's I don't think by any means we're going to be on July 1st and we find out Jalen Brunson resigns with the Mavs, and then we find out the Knicks fired Rick Brunson. I mean, I think he's going
to well, never mind then. We don't.
Yeah, never mind. See you later. It was conditional. Conditional hire upon your son signing here. Like that'd be odd.
Absolutely.
Like big state, right? You gotta get Jesus Shuttlesworth to go, and then we'll set you free. Little he got game worked in there.
Nice. I like it. All right, let's finish up here. The Kings are open to trading the fourth round. To me, this is, and I mentioned this earlier about how you should be willing to listen to offers on anything. Of course they are. Are the Rockets open to trading the third pick? Yes. Is any team open to trading any pick? Absolutely. If the Celtics called up the Orlando Magic and said, hey, we're getting a little tired of Jason Tatum doing good things, we'll give them to you for the first pick. Do you think the Magic would say yes? Of course they would. Of course they would, right? Like every team should be open to trading any pick, right? Like that's, but that being said, what actually gets suggested with headlines like these is that they are more willing to listen to offers where it doesn't have to be somebody does something dumb in order to get the deal, like they're open to actually moving the pick and negotiating something, as opposed to no, we're only trading this if somebody does something stupid.
Yeah. And this is tough, right? Because it's not that the Kings fell to fourth moved up to fourth in a 3-player draft, but it is a top 3 draft, right? It's Smith, Holmgren, and Banchero at the top. Then it's kind of the next grouping is Ivy, Murray, Sharp, Daniels.
The first pick of the tier.
Yeah, exactly. If you start going in tiers. So James Ham of Kingsbeat wrote this article, at least is where I saw this topic. And he mentioned a bunch of different things. He mentioned that they're open to listening, which you're absolutely right. They should be. Because part of what they're looking at is, can we get veteran help to put around Fox and Sabonis and push us forward finally? That's risky because we've talked about it a million times. Boy, the West is going to be deep next year and really good teams. Probably the only 2 teams I think we can kind of point to say, they're probably not ready yet are the Thunder and the Rockets, right there. They're probably going to be the 2 teams that are going to be still kind of that maybe they're taking their steps forward, but they're not ready to jump into playoff contention, barring something really unexpected. James Ham also mentioned, they could trade out entirely. One of the other things he mentioned is maybe they try to move up into the top 3. Say, hey, we'll add something to 4 and go up. And, it doesn't seem like the Magic, Thunder, or Rockets are open to moving back. But maybe you catch one of them and they feel that way. So it is, be open to everything. It's just, we talked about this with the coaches and stuff of earning the right to just kind of, we're going to trust that it's going to work.
Yeah.
I'm not going to trust that whatever they do is going to work in Sacramento. Right. I'm just not going to believe it.
We haven't seen that. We haven't seen it happen. So we'll see what ultimately they do. I mean, it's a good thing that they moved up, but they'd be in much better shape if they had moved up to 3rd instead of moved up to 4th.
Because any one of Smith, Holmgren, Banchero fits them that much better. Because now if you're talking about, coming back, all right, so Jaden Ivey, let's say he's your top guy on your board. All right, well, that's another guard. If you just drafted, Halliburton, Fox, then Halliburton, then Mitchell. Like now you're going to pick yet another guard and try to make this work. Like that starts to get, kind of messy. None of those guys are guards with size to, all right, well, they're a guard, but we can play them at the 3 in a 3-guard grouping and we'll be okay. Like none of those guys really fit that mold there. So it's 4th is a tricky spot. I don't know about trading back because I don't know who's looking to jump up, into that spot. You have to really believe in whether it's Jaden Ivey, Keegan Murray, Dyson Daniel, Shadon Sharp. You got to really believe in one of those guys. So but let's see. We'll find out.
Should be an exciting draft regardless. Maybe the 4th pick will be on the move. We'll have to wait and find out.
We didn't talk about that with the Lakers. They're I saw reporting
just came out.
That just came out that they're going to try to buy a 2nd-round pick. So which is good. I mean, they should, right? Anything you can do to infuse some talent towards the bottom of that roster.
And they have about $4 million or so to go spend because they didn't use that money as they're throwing money this year. So so they could potentially go and grab a 2nd-rounder. And they've had a pretty high hit rate on those types of picks. So
that's exactly what you need to do. I mean, and there are definitely teams with extra picks that are not going to, like Memphis. I wouldn't be surprised if you couldn't buy their 2nd-rounder in the middle of the 2nd round. They've got 2 first-rounders. They're running out of roster spots. This is one of the things where just a kind of just quick aside as we're wrapping up here is this is part of the whole deal with the expansion talk is teams are running out of roster spots because they're hitting on better players deeper into these drafts and finding players on the undrafted market. And now all of a sudden, there were multiple teams this summer who they have actually some money to spend, but it's roster spots are the challenge for them. The Thunder are one of those teams. They're about out of roster spots because they get a whole bunch of guys you kind of like on their roster. So that starts to, as you look at things like, all right, that could be why we could, see expansion coming sooner rather than later. Cause it's, everybody worries about the top end of the roster, but we're seeing a lot of guys who are pretty good players that might be in roster fights that should be on an NBA team somewhere at some point. And if I was the Lakers, go buy a pick, get in there, take advantage of one of those teams that's just looking to move out. Make a little bit of cash. Has no impact on your salary cap or anything either. So go do it. It's a way to add some cheap talent.
Yep, get it done. Yep. All right. Well, that wraps things up, man. Packed show today. A lot of stuff, and we are heading into that part of the year where everything's going to be coming fast and furious, and we are going to be busy. We're probably going to be looking at multiple shows going out each day for a little bit here. It's going to be crazy and a lot of fun. Can't wait to get into this NBA offseason. But
Trevor, we're 17 days from the NBA draft.
Gosh, how is this possible? I'm not even done researching for the draft. It's 17 days.
Yeah, me either. Yeah, I feel pretty good that I have a at least loose understanding about the top 25 to 35 guys right now, but it's not now. I'm trying to get into those guys that are definite 2nd rounders because I'm trying to be prepped and ready. My personal goal is one, I want to know something about every single player who comes off the board draft night, and then when we're getting all the we'll go to camp signing a 2-way. I don't want any one of those names to surprise me. when we go. And I do pretty good. There's usually one or two guys. In the draft, I'm generally good with this year. There's only be 58, but I'm generally pretty good with the 60 guys that get picked. It's usually one or two every year where I'm like, I don't know a lot about that guy who's going to training camp, or sometimes it's just a summer league spot with that. But 17 days away, like unbelievable, 2.5 weeks.
Crazy. It's coming up fast. All right, everybody. Make sure you do subscribe to the NBA Front Office YouTube channel. Turn on those notifications as well. Don't forget to follow us over on Apple Podcasts. Leave us that 5-star review. We certainly appreciate it. Till next time, see ya and stay safe.